Blimey. Ooh, this is one out of a jam jar you got here.
Warning. The House of Mystery contains demons, angels, elementals, magicians, wizards, apparitions, adult language, and discussions. If you're easily offended, do not enter the House of Mystery.
All right, then. On with the show.
All right, hello, welcome everyone to the House of Mystery, the John Constantine and Friends podcast. I am Michael, your host and tour guide through the House of Horrors, and my partner and housekeeper, the demon bisexual butler. Hello, David is here.
How's it going, everybody?
Hopefully you have cleaned the house.
Oh, yes. All the ectoplasm has been cleaned off the floor.
Ectoplasm. Okay. You're foul. What a foul human being. Well, actually, you're not a human being, are you? You're a bisexual demon.
Exactly. So, not human.
All right. So, welcome everyone to the House of Mystery. If you're new to the show, you can find us in iTunes and Spotify, as well as all those other places that you can find podcasts. However, iTunes and Spotify are our preferred places for people to listen to our shows due to their rating and review systems. And when people leave us a review and rate the show, it actually triggers algorithms that help others find our show. Okay, so in this episode, we're going to discuss Justice League Incarnate with most of our focus on issue number 2.
Yes.
And the reason for that is because the lack of connection to the darker side of DC and the inclusion of both costumed Hellblazer and Etrigan the Demon as Earth 13's Superman,
Yes.
or as they call him, Superdemon. And that all took place in issue 2. David, what did you think of Justice League Incarnate?
Overall, I've read the complete story, and as a DC series, I actually really enjoyed it because it carried on
Oh, yeah?
the story that Multiversity started with Grant Morrison.
Yep.
In
Do you
regards,
feel like this new writer did justice to Grant Morrison's original story?
Oh, yeah. I really do, because like the characters that he dives in on, it really kind of shows why the multiverse in DC is so much better than the multiverse in Marvel.
Yeah.
Because multiversity and like how Justice League Incarnate shows the multiverse in DC really leaves it open for anyone's imagination. Marvel is solely based, while they try to say, oh, there's multiple Earths, there's not.
Yeah.
You have to follow one singular timeline. And yeah, there's other timelines that they could deviate, but at the end of the day, you're stuck with Marvel Prime Time.
Yeah.
That's it.
So Justice Incarnate is a Justice League team made up of heroes from across the multiverse that are tasked with protecting it from multiverse level threats. And this is where Justice League Incarnate comes into play, which is a 5-issue limited series, which was published in 2021 as well as 2022. It starred Justice League Incarnate and followed on from Infinite Frontier Volume 1. It does require, and this is where I have some problems with it, it does require that you have a vast amount of DC knowledge to fully enjoy your reading experience.
Oh, yeah.
Now, it doesn't mean you can't grasp the overall story. That much is clear. However, if you really want to experience everything that this storyline offers, you do have to be somewhat familiar with a lot of the major DC events, at least the ones that pertain to the multiverse.
To the multiverse, yeah. And
So-
that's the thing is, in regards to this title, if you are a huge DC fanboy,
Yeah.
this is your title that you have to be reading, because they touch on things that are little details that have been passed around in a lot of DC comics, and suddenly in this series they elaborate more about it. Like, especially with the theme that we're going to be talking about today with Earth 13. Earth 13 was first introduced in Multiversity by Grant Morrison. Here, Williamson just elaborates more on it and actually shows more details on it. We get to see the tavern, the quote-unquote tavern of mystery, which was freaking awesome. And he makes more nods to how Earth 13 works. And the fact that in this issue we get ties to Vertigo. And essentially what DC in the story is saying is like all those DC tropes of Vertigo get transferred over into Earth 13.
That's what I've seen a lot of people say, or should I read what a lot of people have said about JL Incarnate, is that it's interesting to see how they continue Grant Morrison's idea pertaining to Earth 13, and which is, as you said, essentially the resting place for a lot of Vertigo stuff. Interestingly. And that's pretty much the reason why I decided to continue, or at least follow through with our plans to discuss at least issue 2 of Justice League Incarnate, because it does have a lot to do with the darker side of DC. Now, yes, as the overall story, if you were to take the overall story into context, yes, or into play, I should say, yes, it doesn't necessarily fit with what we typically discuss, but issue 2 does because of its inclusion of Earth 13. So the synopsis for issue number 2: as Darkseid's quest leaves a bloody trail across the multiverse, the Justice League Incarnate ventures to the dark world of horror known as Earth 13. They must enlist the aid of Superdemon and his League of Shadows against not only Darkseid, but also the evil power couple of Asmodel and Sheeta Queen. And the Sheeta Queen. As you had mentioned, Dave, this issue is written by Joshua Williamson, which was also the writer for the last couple years for the regular Justice League title, correct?
Yes.
Yes. And also it was written by Dennis Culver. I believe Joshua Williamson wrote issues 1 and 5, and Dennis Culver wrote issues 2 through 4. The art is by Kyle Hotz, Andre Bresson, Paul Peltier, and Norm Rapmund. And colors by Hi-Fi. Okay, so the thing that this issue does for us, Constantine and Dark Side of DC fans, is give us a bit of a peek into the goings-on of Earth 13, which is a universe essentially made up of the occult. The members of Justice League Incarnate find themselves on Earth 13 when they are tracking down Darkseid through his boom tube to the location of a crack in the multiverse. But they accidentally fall through a gap in the boundary between the physical and spiritual realms and end up on the twilight world of Earth 13. So without even going further, David, tell me that doesn't sound so fucking awesome.
It does, doesn't it? That's why I'm so excited to see them dive more into Earth 13. And on a side note,
this has to be the beginning of that, right? This has to be the beginning of delving into Earth 13.
Yes.
We have to do this.
Here's the thing. On a side note, I know me and you talked previously about the DC round robin on our Patreon side on the pre-show. But, like, do you realize that Suicide Squad Dark, that title, actually delves into Earth 13.
Oh, does it?
Yeah, because Waller sends her vampire Batman to go kill the League of Shadows in Earth 13.
Okay. Interesting. See how, dude, Earth 13 is where it's at for me.
Earth 13.
We need some more stories delving into that. And as we go through Earth 13 and everything that's included in this universe, I feel like a lot of our listeners who also obviously love the darker side of DC, they're going to be salivating. They're going to want this as well. So as I said, the thing that this issue does for us is the Constantine aspect and the darker side of DC, because as I said, the overall story doesn't really veer into the occult or the darker side of DC after issue 2.
Yes.
But the things that they do in issue 2 does make the overall story for us John Constantine fans worth the read because of its connection to Earth 13. So what happens is essentially the members of Justice League Incarnate in issue 2 here, they contact their allies, the League of Shadows, which is under the control of the Superdemon, which is Etrigan, who is essentially the Superman of this universe.
Yes.
And Hellblazer, the costumed version. Those are the two leaders of the League of Shadows, and they go to meet them at the Tavern of Mystery, where the League gathered the heroes of Earth 13 for a full assault on Darkseid.
Yes.
Hellblazer greets them and tells them to wait while the rest of the team finish setting up the mercenary, or I should say the necessary, magic to track Darkseid. Now, that's unfortunately where it ends.
Yes.
For the Superdemon and the Hellblazer of Earth 13, the story moves past them. And that's the part that irked me just a bit, because essentially what they were used for was just simply a platform to continue the story forward. That is the only problem I have. Now, that's not a story problem. It's a problem as
Hellblazer fan.
as how it was marketed, because I felt like this was marketed to us because of the inclusion of Superdemon. I feel like a lot of us Constantine and Justice League Dark fans had assumed that Superdemon would be playing a big part of the storyline. I mean, he had the cover page.
He had the cover page, and honestly, when you get through this issue, the highlights, the absolute art highlights, are on Earth 13.
Mm-hmm.
Anytime they go into Earth 13, the art is just the best in the entire comic. There's a theme to it. They put so much detail into giving Earth 13, and then it's used to, and I understand it's used to push forward the story of Justice League Incarnate, because at the end of the day, the main story revolves around
Incarnate, JL Incarnate,
Superman president. I want to say
Calvin.
Calvin.
Yeah.
It revolves around Calvin and that the new multiversity hero, I forgot what Doctor Multiverse.
Yeah.
And those are the two main characters, and basically, Earth 13 was just used to help them propel along and get allies.
Yeah, but even though that was the bulk of the story, at least they use Earth 13 in such a way that it did create mystery and intrigue.
Oh, yeah.
And I think ultimately at the end of the day, after reading issue two is the reason why I gravitated to it. And I was actually, inclined to review it on our show, because I felt like it is necessary to discuss, at least in the way of fleshing out this idea of Earth 13. Because yes, there aren't very many story points that we can get into, but we can use issue 2 of Justice League Incarnate to facilitate a discussion on Earth 13 and how this world operates.
And especially when you can go into each page that Earth 13's in, and you can see every single little detail. Everything matters, like what they're talking about. I love the fact that basically the password to get around on Earth 13 is Vertigo said backwards.
It's awesome.
And like every single time they spend in the Tavern of Mystery, I'm looking at all the characters and I'm like, oh my God, that's a version of so-and-so.
They're basically mirrored versions of characters that we're all familiar with.
But
with a slight
supernatural twist.
I was gonna say a monster twist, but
twist.
yeah, supernatural twist is probably a better way to explain it, which makes it interesting. Now, the intricacies of Earth 13 are also different, and meaning how the universe operates. According to the DC Wiki and this new entry after issue 2 of Justice League Incarnate debuted, they have a better, more further I should say a better, more fleshed out explanation of how it operates. Earth 13 is described as an occult world that consists of 13-hour days and 13-month years, locked in a perpetual mystic twilight. This Earth is home to Etrigan, rocketed from the planet Camelot by Merlin, who as Superdemon defends this gothic universe alongside the terrifying supernatural defenders of the League of Shadows, which does include the costumed Hellblazer.
Yes. And the cool thing about it is the League of Shadows is essentially their version of the Justice League. And essentially, this is the world that I've always felt that Justice League Dark should always be put in. Justice League Dark, that team should be just as powerful as the actual Justice League.
So if they were to continue, let's say, the Justice League Dark title, perhaps a change of locale would make the title a little possibly more unique.
Yeah.
If you, well, and you know what, David, I would probably agree with that assessment, because I feel like a part of the problem with Justice League Dark is the fact that they decided, and it's something that I wasn't necessarily keen on, when they brought in Wonder Woman as the leader, and then they essentially made it a peripheral Justice League Dark group.
Yeah.
Meaning they operated within the same headquarters as Justice League Dark, except they were in the basement, and they became an official group. And that is when JL Dark, for me, even though I enjoyed the stories, because it's Ram V. Ram V did a great job when he took over from Tanyan. They did a great job, but at the end of the day, it also removes a lot of the mystique and the mystery away from Justice League Dark, because you're essentially shining a light on them. And a lot of times you want these things to go unknown. Like, you don't want to necessarily shine a light on what goes bump in the night. That's a part of the fear tactics. That's a part of the suspense. And that's what the original Justice League Dark did so well, is it wasn't really an official group, except by title of the comic book alone.
Yes.
They didn't necessarily run around calling themselves, hey, we're members of the Justice League Dark. That, in essence, I felt hurt the overall quality of Justice League Dark. But if you were to create this group, the Justice League Dark, on Earth 13,
yes,
suddenly it makes perfect sense, because you're dealing with a world completely governed by the occult.
Yes. That's why I thought they should have actually just done a series based around the League of Shadows in Earth 13, because you do realize that the League of Shadow members is, and I have the list right in front of me, it's Anataz, which is Zatanna, Deadman, Enchantress, Fate, Hellblazer, Ragman, Superdemon, Swamp Man, and
please.
Witchboy.
That is so good.
That
First off, I love
That's
that.
essentially
I
Justice
love
League
that.
Dark.
I love that Anataz is
Anataz.
Zatanna spelled backwards.
Yes, and the thing I love about the Anataz character, every other characters, if you notice, they're the opposites of what we know them as in the Prime DC universe. So Anataz essentially is Zatanna. If Zatanna gave in to her lust for magic and just embraced it.
No, please.
And then you have Deadman, who is actually alive, but he's stuck in the undead version instead of being incorporeal.
Yeah. Now, the thing that's interesting about this version of Hellblazer is they have a complete history for him, which I think is also quite intriguing. Johnny's world, according to this DC wiki here, Johnny's world was invaded by a mysterious group of vampires from an alternate world who captured him and his teammates, but the mortal form of Etrigan managed to release him and easily destroyed the vampiric invaders and released his comrades. The Leaguers realized that they were facing a vampire invasion, but now they were ready, waiting for them. Thus, when the vampires finally crossed to their home, the entire League of Shadows charged against the super vampires, with Hellblazer facing off the Wonder Woman when Anataz conjured a spell that made the vampire crave coffee
instead
of blood.
See how crazy that is?
Yeah, that's definitely a Grant Morrison storyline right there.
Yes.
So there's a lot of interesting avenues that they can take this version of Hellblazer, and I believe, David, that's why I find Earth 13 so interesting, because we've seen other variants of John Constantine. We've seen other variants of Batman, other variants of Swamp Thing, and for the most part, they're essentially reflections with minor differences.
Yes.
When you're dealing with other universe versions of these characters. But then you have Earth 13, and these characters are vastly different.
Yes.
Their personalities may be the same. Their what makes them who they are, their characterizations may be the same, but their stories and their origins are vastly different. And that makes this area ripe for the picking for stories, because there's essentially no limit to the types of stories you can tell in a setting like this. Imagine writing a story for costumed Hellblazer in a sandbox this big that has rarely been used.
Exactly. Think about that, Mike. Think about that.
I know.
In a world where the thing about Constantine in the regular DC universe is Constantine is confined by the fact that in the regular DC universe, magic is very taboo. So there's not in the real DC universe, there's not a lot of room for stories that Constantine could dive into without actually, making parents out there in comic book land scared.
Yeah.
But Earth 13, because it's so outlandish, and it reminds me of Doom Patrol in a lot of ways.
Oh, yeah.
That you could easily do a series that is tailor-made for mass audiences that people will find niche and will gravitate towards that because it's different. And you can open the doorways to actually doing so many different types of stories for all these characters. And it's so refreshing to see a world where, I'm sorry, Batman is not the leader.
I know. I half expected to see him in a position of leadership.
No,
on Earth
and he's not there.
13.
And instead,
Yeah.
it's Hellblazer that's technically the Batman type
Yeah.
in Earth 13, which is like, come on, that in itself makes me a big fan of this concept.
Yeah. There's just so much you can do with this. In fact, I know there may be Hellblazer fans who listen to our shows who may say, no, this isn't
This is
Hellblazer.
wrong.
This is not right. This is an abomination. And you're absolutely right. It is an abomination. But this is one of those rare moments where an abomination works well.
Works well.
Because you're not really contaminating the Hellblazer we're all used to. In fact, I feel like if you do something like this, you can easily have a regular Vertigo type Hellblazer storyline running, and then you can also have a more larger than life superhero version of Constantine, going on over on Earth 13. And to me, that would feel a little bit more respectful of material, because I know there are certain Hellblazer fans out there that are unwilling to, and I understand, that are unwilling to compromise when it comes to Hellblazer, and they pretty much have rejected anything outside of Vertigo. But this might be something of a compromise. We get the Vertigo storyline going again, a version of that via Black Label, or possibly the Sandman label's over, isn't it?
Yeah, Sandman label's over. I would go as far, Mike, as not even put it in the Black Label. Put it in the mass audience market.
Do you think they can actually? I don't think they can do a Vertigo type mature storyline on the regular imprint, Dave.
I think they could with this. With Earth 13.
With Earth 13. Yeah, for sure.
They could easily do it.
With Earth 13, yes. Although I would David.
They could, Mike.
They could. I'm not disagreeing. They could, but I feel like it would be a missed opportunity if they didn't put this on Black Label. Imagine the horror that they could truly delve into.
Oh, okay, yeah. If they were to actually jump into that imprint and focus solely on the horror aspect,
yeah,
yes, that'd be amazing. Because, the just coming from me and you are currently covering, the Swamp Thing title, Green Hell.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. Has the elements of the Thing, has elements of John Carpenter's horror flicks. And can you imagine a series that has mind fuckery like Earth 13?
Yeah, if you want to do Tom Taylor type of fuckery, because that's why that's where Tom Taylor excels. I know we talk a lot of shit about him
but
of late.
He knows how to write it.
But where he excels is in the larger than life, in those Elseworld type stories where he doesn't necessarily have to adhere to established characterizations and established canon. And even though I probably don't want Taylor writing an Earth 13 story, he probably could do a decent job with an Earth 13 story.
Oh, easily.
If I'm being rational here.
I think he can, because especially if you tell
Deceased was solid.
Deceased was solid, and also DC Knights is actually good. It's actually pretty well done. But it goes to like the one thing that me and you have said about Taylor. If you give him a blank check and give him something that he's passionate about, he can do it.
I also think Spurrier could do a very good job with an Earth 13 title.
I think Spurrier would do an absolute awesome title on Earth 13, especially if he's able to add the element of like a very personal story.
Yeah, nuanced. Which is what he does very well.
A nuanced story.
Yeah.
Taylor could actually knock out a Earth 13 story in
high concept.
Yeah. Make it an action-packed adventure. Yes.
And that would also work. Yeah. I mean, Ram V, I feel also could probably knock this out the park as well. Although, if I had to choose, I would probably, for an Earth 13 story, just off the top of my head, I would probably choose Tom Taylor or Spurrier over Ram V.
My pick by far, my dream pick is Grant Morrison.
Oh, yeah, of course.
If Grant Morrison said
he's
no,
not going to do it.
Earth 13's mine, I'm not going, yes, it is, Grant.
Listen, if he wanted to, then yes, by all means, please, Grant, please do it. But
do it.
I don't think he has any intention of doing a Earth 13 story. I feel like a lot of times he does things just to fuck with people, and then once he's done what he wanted to do by fucking around with people, he moves on.
He's like that dog that basically takes a dump and basically just leaves it.
He basically, yeah. It's like the cat that shits in the box and it takes off running.
Just takes off running.
Yeah. No, what? No, because that's a horrible analogy, because then we're saying that Grant Morrison takes shits. Basically what he does is shit. And I don't want to,
No.
I don't want people to think that, because Grant Morrison is one of my favorites. But no, what I'm trying to say is that it feels like he loses bets. Like he's sitting around a poker table with his buddies, his other comic book writers, and they're like, listen, if you lose this hand, I guarantee you there's no way you can write a story on Earth 13 in a costume Hellblazer. And he's like, oh, yeah, okay, we'll see. He loses the bet, and then he proceeds to write a story. That's what Grant Morrison's inspiration feels like for many of his stories. It feels like he lost a bet, and because he's extremely talented, he can turn the shittiest idea into gold.
Yeah. And think about it this way. The whole idea, the whole concept of the Hellblazer, that's what the hero is called on Earth 13. Grant Morrison created it out of spite because they told him he couldn't use Constantine. So when he gets a chance to make a Constantine, he decides to make the Hellblazer.
I love it. I have no problems with it at all. Do you have problems with that type of stuff, David? Being a big Hellblazer fan, are you jaded or pissed off because you were a Vertigo fan by the things they do with him now?
No, because
some of the more mainstream things, or do you understand that there can be a place for both versions?
No, there can be a place for both versions. I mean, that's why, that's what makes the original John Constantine that much stronger, because there's a copy. It might be a copy of him, but that doesn't take away from the original. That actually emphasizes the strengths and the personality of the original. That's why I love that moment when he basically looks at Calvin and tells him, "Oh yeah, you're my favorite superhero in the whole multiverse." John
My
Constantine,
favorite Superman.
Yeah, John Constantine would never say that.
Oh, yeah.
He hates Superman. So the fact that the Hellblazer is the opposite of Constantine is actually really cool, because that shows also when you take a case study of like Constantine versus the Hellblazer, and you realize the Hellblazer is actually a nicer guy than John.
Yeah, well,
Because he wants to
I'm
be
sure
a hero.
he has his share of demons as well.
He has a share of
which
his
is why
demons.
we need to explore.
Exactly.
We have to explore. And for me, Dave, that's ultimately the highlight of this issue, of issue number 2 of Justice League Incarnate. The exploration of Earth 13 and its connection to the world of magic or the occult and the possibilities. And of course, this pushes my lore boner to new heights.
Oh yeah, and
I
that's
mean,
the beauties of this series.
Yes, sometimes there are shows. There are sometimes comic book runs that satisfy the cravings for sheer story. I felt like Cy Spurrier's run in Hellblazer did that for me. It just satisfied my desire to read a true Hellblazer story once again. But then there are stories like this that relies a lot. Let me rephrase that. My enjoyment of reading the issue has less to do with what they gave us in the story and more about the possibilities of the elements that were included.
And that's the thing. That's honestly the strength of the series overall in Justice League Incarnate.
Oh, the possibilities?
The possibilities.
Okay.
Because like getting a chance to get a deep dive into the multiverse of DC, Snyder did it with Death Metal, right? Where you got to show the different versions of Batman. And to me, that was small scale. He thought a lot of people, even with like that are fans of multiversity, felt that Scott Snyder wrote his story too narrow-minded. He thought, "Oh, I'll just focus on Batman. Batman's the key." But when Grant Morrison did Multiversity, he said, "No, screw that. It's everything. Everything has its different versions." And it opened the creative, I guess the creative like juggernaut that became Justice League Incarnate, because any writer who jumps onto that series can write whatever they want.
I do not believe I've ever read Multiversity.
Multiversity it's a very polarizing series, because many people there's some people out there that are not big fans of Grant Morrison because
I know he's odd.
he's odd.
Yeah.
And his stories tend to be very high concept, very odd.
And sometimes they borderline on pretentious.
Pretentious.
But listen, pretentious is where I like to play in. I like to play within the pretentious. So sometimes that works for me. So I can get behind the pretentious nature of some of Morrison's writings. But I do understand why how some do not care to be involved in his stories.
But on the side of, I'm a fan of Multiversity because I always tell people, read Multiversity and come to the realization that essentially you can do anything in the multiverse of DC.
My question, though, is, Dave, how much is the Hellblazer and the Superdemon a part of the Multiversity storyline? Are they kind of like afterthoughts? Are they mere introductions, or do they have big roles to play?
They're introductions.
Okay.
I'll be honest.
So it's kind of like issue number 2 here.
Exactly.
Just a scraping of the surface, and
because Morrison, during Multiversity, wanted to show the impacts of magic.
okay.
And like the differences of, he wanted to show that basically the problem in magic in the DC universe is the fact that in the prime DC universe, magic is, like what I mentioned, it's seen as taboo. It's in the shadows. Why does magic have to be in the shadows? Why can't it be in the forefront of everything? Why does it have to hide in the shadows? And then that's when Grant Morrison and Multiversity came up with the idea of that concept. Okay, let's take all those characters that hid in the shadows, Constantine, Swamp Thing. Let's make them the capes. They're the real heroes of the world. Can it work? Yeah, it can. Especially if like you have the Hellblazer, dude, because the Hellblazer, I'm sorry, he's much nicer than John. He's more he's more heroic oriented than Constantine.
Yeah. So, David, you had mentioned the art. And I'm not sure who did the art for issue 2, because there was a list of numerous artists.
Yeah.
But I will agree that the art's pretty fantastic. And the way they captured the Tavern of Mystery, which is essentially the Oblivion Bar.
Yes.
The way they captured the Tavern of Mystery with the use of shadows and the high contrast ratio, it actually resembles these pages only. They actually resemble the Vertigo days.
Oh, yeah. They
The
do.
artwork literally resembles what we used to get in the Vertigo storylines.
And that's what I
This doesn't
appreciate.
reflect the rest of the 5-issue storyline.
Yes. That's what I appreciate with Justice League Incarnate and Multiversity is like when they jump to different worlds, different art takes over.
I think I'm not a fan of that.
But in this concept, it
Yep.
works.
That's what I was
Because
about to say. It works with a storyline like this.
It helps separate each world to its own personality. And it's funny in this one because I kept thinking to myself when I read this, the team of artists that tackled this, whoever was given Justice League or given Earth 13, all the other artists were pissed off because they're like going, man, he gets to do all the cool shadows and everything. Because if you look at every single panel in Earth 13, like what you said, he took concepts that are infamous in Vertigo, the deep contrast, the use of angles on the faces. The faces aren't flat with all the characters. They all have different monstrous looks to them, right? And then you compare it to the other pages when they jump into regular DC universes, and everything looks flat, like a normal superhero comic. I guarantee you the other artists were looking at the guys who were doing Earth 13 and going, motherfuckers doing like this. Why can't I do that? And they're probably sending notes to like the writer. Hey, can I put something right here? Can I do like what so-and-so's doing in page 3? And they're like going, no, you do the regular stuff.
Yeah, David, there's some cool stuff in here. For example, there's I want to say on page 14 of issue 2, when Justice League Incarnate is convening with the League of Shadows, led by Superdemon and the Hellblazer, they show them where the League of Shadows shows Incarnate where Darkseid is residing. And they show this scene where all-out war is taking place.
Between him and the Great Darkness.
And the God of Evil. Have you ever heard of the God of Evil in DC Comics?
No.
Because I haven't, and yet now I need to know more about the God of Evil.
The Great Darkness, yeah.
It says, and the God of Evil plans to steal its power, but the Great Darkness has many servants across infinite worlds. That's a storyline setup for an Earth 13 story. Let's do it. Come on, people out there who's listening. I know we have some writers out there listening, some DC writers.
And you can't tell
Get
me,
it done.
That page with the heroes surrounding the crystal ball that's showing them this, that just gives me so much feels of the old Vertigo titles.
Absolutely.
Where, you have those dreamlike sequences like in Sandman.
Yep.
And that's what made me smile about this issue is like, at least it's someone that understands the history of Vertigo.
Yeah. I was pleased with this issue, without a doubt. The critical reception overall for Justice League Incarnate, it looks like it's sitting on average at an 8.0 for the critic rating. And from the reader side, the average user rating is sitting at 7.4.
Yeah.
So once again, there's that gap between the critics and the actual mainstream readership. Issue number 2 itself has the lowest rating of the 5 issues.
Yeah.
Would you have read all 5 issues? I've only read the first 3.
Mm-hmm. And
would you agree with that general consensus?
If you're looking at it at the concept of if you're following the story,
The actual Justice League Incarnate
story, then yes.
Okay.
I'd agree with that because
is this a bit of a detour?
It's
that why?
a detour. Yeah. It's a detour because you end up seeing another world that possibly could help Calvin and his crew, but they get whisked away.
Yeah, and they never go back to it.
They can't. They're not allowed to for some strange reason, because toward the end you begin finding out that Darkseid or Darkseid knew about everything.
Mm-hmm.
So he was trying to stop people from actually interacting with Earth 13 because he knew that any aid from Earth 13 would sway the war in their favor. That's how powerful Earth 13 was.
Okay, so Dave, why don't you give me your final thoughts on stick specifically on issue 2?
Issue 2.
Yeah, and then if you want, give me a second grade for Justice League. You know what? No, we focus on the dark side of DC.
We can just focus on the dark side.
What's your overall thoughts and rating for issue number 2?
Issue number 2 for Justice League Incarnate is a really cool look into the landscape of DC's multiverse. If anyone out there is interested to understand the DC multiverse, pick up this issue. It will whet your appetite to go pick up Multiversity and Justice League Incarnate, because there's something to be said that I understand why mass audiences probably don't jive with this, because you don't have the regular Superman, you don't have the regular Wonder Woman, regular Batman even. You don't have the regular heroes that everyone's used to. But if you give it a chance, you'll see that these characters are actually well written. So for the issue itself, I give it a 89. It's a very strong issue. It's really cool. I love the concepts. The highlights for me, honestly, is the artwork when it comes down to Earth 13.
Yep.
Because there's actually creative thought done into putting the setting together.
Behind it, yeah.
And like I said, I kid you not, I could see the other artists going, God damn it, I want to draw this side. Why am I on this side? And like, honestly, after this, I have that dream scenario that I want Grant Morrison to come back and do another Multiversity, but the main character or main concept is Earth 13.
Yeah, David, that would be very magical. Magical. So stupid. No, I agree. That's an amazing idea. I feel like that would be fantastic for Grant Morrison to come back and give us a follow-up series that revolves mostly around Earth 13.
Especially when afterwards, when you get through the entire story of Justice League Incarnate, and you're kind of, it's alluded that basically how much more powerful Earth 13 is, and that's why it's so dangerous.
Yeah. Well, that's something that, again, piqued my interest, and that's what I look for in certain stories like this. When you're dealing with a new world that we really don't know a lot about, make sure you give us something to go on, and that's something that the writer did really well. When they were first entering the Tavern of Mystery, the Hellblazer said, "Do not eat nor drink anything.
Don't even look at something.
In fact, don't even look at anything for too long." Now, they didn't explain the reasons behind that, but one can assume, knowing the DC world and the many oddities that govern the universe or the realities of these worlds, your mind runs crazy. Like, well, are they going to die? Are they going to turn into a monster? Or is something horrible going to happen? Are they going to become cursed? That's why this issue worked for me. That's why the delving into Earth 13 felt so satisfying, even though it's only one issue out of the 5. I still feel like it was worth the purchase for me because of everything that we were given pertaining to Earth 13. And again, sometimes with issues like this, it's not always about just the story, but it's about the possibilities that are presented with the story. And I feel like that's the biggest winner for me, is that it opened the door to possibilities. And my mind starts to speculate about many different things that they can possibly do with Earth 13 and Hellblazer, as well as the Superdemon.
And you realize that basically, now I saved this little tidbit for the end because this is going to probably be surprising for a lot of our listeners who listen to our Patreon stuff. We've been talking about the round robin, right? The round robin for DC, you have series go against each other, and the winner gets a full-fledged series. So you have, we've been talking about Constantine and Etrigan. We've been talking about, I think it's the horror tour around DC.
Mm-hmm.
But the one that basically piqued my interest after thinking about it, after reading this, was Suicide Squad Dark. Because Suicide Squad Dark, Amanda Waller goes to war against Earth 13.
Huh.
And she tries to send Vampire Batman to go kill the League of Shadows.
Interesting.
So you have Batman trying to kill the Hellblazer. And I'm like going, okay, I want to see this. I want to see this.
See, I've been voting against that. But
Superdemon versus Vampire Batman.
Yeah. See, that could have been interesting too.
That could be interesting.
Yeah. See the possibilities that Earth 13 presents?
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, Dave. Well, my rating is 79%. Again, I'm rating solely on just issue number 2 and the story and what was given. I don't feel like the issue was overly great in the way of writing, just because it does feel like a detour to the rest of the story. It almost feels like it was intentionally done just so they can introduce the oddities of Earth 13.
Yes.
Hopefully there's a strategy behind that. Maybe they're trying to remind us of Earth 13 for a reason. We'll see. So, yeah, 78% or 79%. And this does bring us to the end of our discussion. I want to thank everybody for listening. And also be sure to find us on Patreon. We do a specialty show for our subscribers. It's just a mini version of this show that we call the Oblivion Bar. It's a little more casual. We get through the latest Constantine news, things that we weren't able to get into during our regular discussions. And it's only $1 on our Patreon tiers. $1, and you gain access to those behind the scenes type show every single episode discussion. So patreon.com/RaymanDigital pledge. Thank you, David.
Thank you. Bye-bye.